Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Kickin' It with David Akers. Man, I've had a great time reminiscing with some of these great athletes and hearing their stories. And this week is no different. I'm excited to talk about this new guy. You know, it's interesting. President Roosevelt, in a letter back in 1900, wrote, "Speak softly, carry a big stick, and you'll go far." Man, that sums up Sheldon Brown. I'm telling you, a relatively soft-spoken person off the field and a person that carried that big hit stick on the field, a corner that was absolutely demolishing folks out there. In Sheldon's fantastic 11-year career, he totaled 602 tackles. My goodness, he had 8 sacks, 9 forced fumbles, 143 pass breakups, 26 picks, 6 touchdowns. My goodness. And a guy that would always have a sports coat in his locker. And I'm telling you, because he was either going to some sort of business event or going to some sort of charity function, the guy just led by example. And those who were fortunate to be a teammate of Sheldon knew that if he was going to say something, it must be pretty important and we must listen. So you knew that on game day, 24, man, he was bringing it every single play. Now, Sheldon lives back down in South Carolina where he was born and raised with his family, and Sheldon continues to continue to hit it in a big way in the community. He has Team 24 Travel Baseball. It's an entire club that he has, and he also has Brown's Corner. We'll get into that a little bit as well. Sheldon, with his wife Jenny, his son Dion, and Simone, man, they're doing great things. But just like me, they're little lake rats and love being around the water. Can't wait to hear what is happening with the Brown family. So we got both of you on here today, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, brother, great to have you. And Dion, a great surprise to have you on with us as well. And, you know, you're all coming to us from South Carolina. I'm here kind of in the Nashville area. But I kind of want to go back in the beginning. We'll kind of go through some chronological stuff here of your life. But I'm just excited to kind of hear some of the stories. And I'll dive into a deeper kind of where these are going. But ultimately, can you kind of give us like a kind of a background of you growing up in South Carolina and, you know, kind of your loves, your passion back in the day, who you kind of followed in the sports world and kind of kick it off with that?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Fort Lawn, South Carolina. There were no stoplights in town, dirt road, lived on family property. There was a grandmom at the front of the property, aunt behind her, and then we were in the back of the property on probably approximately 1.5 acres. And there was a industry, Springs Industries. They were the biggest manufacturer in town. So, you know, they kind of made that Lancaster County, Chester County. I was a Chester County kid, Chester County area. It was just kind of the money source. And I would probably say around the age of, I want to say I was maybe 12, 13 years old, that manufacturing company started to kind of shut down. And they decided, I guess, to uproot and move to a different area. And then that area started to kind of swindle and die. A lot of jobs and a lot of those things started to leave. And, you know, I bring that to your attention because there weren't many ways out. The one thing that we could all relate to was you can live, you can dream about being a professional athlete. And you would just wake up every morning and you just put your feet to the road and you just work, work, work. And, I love Bo Jackson. He was a baseball, football guy. Obviously, I love Dion Sanders, football, baseball guy, dual sports. And that was just a dream and a passion, never really a reality that I would be able to do it. But those were some guys and some that I looked up to. And I went to a small Class A high school, Louisville High School down in Richburg, and had a great coach, Benny McMurray, very old school values. You're never good enough. And he just gave me a work ethic and instilled something in me that no matter through all the adversity I would ever face, I would try to figure out a way to come out of it, even if it wasn't through sports. And I think growing up in that environment, like I said, no stoplights in town, dirt roads. I could go to a neighbor's house and get a whipping. Couldn't complain to mom and dad. They had the authority to do that back then. And then I probably got another whipping when they got home. So it was just one of those old country roads where the town was, everyone knew everyone, so you couldn't do anything and get away with it. And I guess I just wanted to see what it was like to have a different life, you know what I mean? Growing up in that environment. Now, flip side of that too, Brian Williams, he played Major League Baseball. I think he stayed in 10 years. He was three houses from me. He was a neighbor. He ended up going to play baseball at the University of South Carolina. Then I think he got drafted to the Astros. Okay. He's out in Houston right now doing some baseball stuff. I had Michael Barber. He was a running back linebacker. I think he played in the NFL. He was out of Louisville High School. He was a Clemson guy. Wesley McFadden. He was a running back from Louisville, went to Clemson, played 4 years there. I can't remember the other great running back he was there with at Clemson that split time. He split time with. So
you also were a running back as well in high school, correct?
Correct. I was probably known as an offensive player. Obviously, I just didn't weigh enough. And, once the scholarship offer came and they told me they wanted me to play defensive back, I started talking, and John Gutekunst was very influential too. But a lot of people was like, you look at a NFL roster, how many running backs on that roster? And you look at the DBs, how many defensive backs? So what are your odds? So
that's a good point.
Yeah, what are your odds?
So don't be a kicker. You're one of 32.
Oh, absolutely not.
Dion, don't be a kicker. So, all right, you were running back, you played defensive back in high school, and obviously you were saying that you love baseball as well, and you followed Bo Jackson which is a dual guy. Obviously Deion Sanders, as you said, dual guy. Funny, I want to talk about Dion in a minute because he put an interesting post out this morning. I love following him on social media. I think he's an inspiration to still our generation because he was that little half tick above us as far as when he was playing, even though I was able to overlap a little bit with him, and I believe you as well. But it's interesting to me because now that he's coaching, but he's doing a lot with Barstools as well, it seems like his influence is getting even deeper right now. But I want to come back to him. But so baseball, I've read and I've heard you talk about was really kind of your first love. But can you kind of give us an understanding of why you kind of shifted from baseball to football to kind of be more of what you went into in profession? But and then with that, we'll get into South Carolina and why'd you end up going there?
Well, from the baseball aspect, like I said, I had those guys. My high school was pretty rich at baseball players, with the Brian Williams and those guys and the guys in my community that grew up. The first thing I was able to have in the neighborhood was a broomstick handle and a ball. So we would go out and play until the lights was off. Lights came on, before you had to be in the house.
You had to be home, absolutely.
Yeah, so, my parents didn't let me play football until I was, 7th grade, and then they wouldn't let me play before that.
Why is that?
My mom just didn't want me to get hurt.
So
you know what I mean? She was just mom.
It's so funny you say that because my son Luke wanted to play tackle, and I said, basically 7th, 8th grade, you can make that transition from like a flag or whatever. And you can learn to do a lot within those years. And when he got to 8th grade, he was so ingrained into soccer, he was like, I don't want to do it now. But I was like, dude, you've got real ability. But he couldn't get over the fact early on that I wouldn't let him do that, to the point where we were at a Pro Bowl. I asked him to go around and ask some of the other guys, when would they let their kids? And it was basically the same type of time frame that your parents and myself were saying that our kids would be able to go out. We didn't want all those extra hits on them at a young age. So go ahead. My apologies.
No, that's fine. And so I just grew up. I was able to play baseball at a young age. I probably started playing baseball when I was 9 years old, 8, 9 years old. And when it came to scholarships, right, leaving high school, there was not a full Division I offer. So the full Division I offer came on the football field, And like I told you, my history of growing up and where I was. I didn't want to put my behind, so I chose to play football.
Absolutely. And
it's funny. There are even some guys that I talk to now that are trying to make it and get an education and to the point of, obviously a goal is to play professionally, whatever you're doing. The reality is it's a very slim number that gets to get there. But if you can get your education and you can get it for free, obviously it's not free. You're working your tail off. Let's put it out there. It's not a free education. You're working your tail off on a daily basis. But if you can do that without having to go into debt and whatnot, take it. I don't care if it's a smaller school or whatever. Get the best opportunity you can go and go do it. And obviously you did that, but you chose to go to South Carolina. So how did that come about? And Lou Holtz was your coach during that time, correct?
I played for Brad Scott 1 year, 1 season. And then I played for Lou Holtz for 3 seasons. Now, my first year out, it's good that you talk about education because I like to bring this up. My first year out of high school, there was a 9th grade science course that the NCAA didn't accept. So that first year I was supposed to enroll with that freshman class, I had to stay home that whole season. And I had my diploma. I had qualified on my SAT, but I had to get credit for that 9th grade science course because they didn't accept it. So I set out that season, went back to school, got that credit. I was 162 when I graduated. I think when I went to Carolina, I was 182. So that was kind of like a red shirt year for me, so it helped me. And I have no regrets about that. Then,
so the school didn't realize during the time like that class, nobody during that time frame was able to kind of say, hey, through compliance of the NCAA.
I went through 4 guidance counselors in 4 years at my school, at my high school.
Hopefully they were all fired.
But now I kind of told you where I grew up at too now.
Sure.
So I'm not putting it on no one else. What I'll tell the kids that I come into contact with today is there's no one more responsible for your success than your parents. So I blame myself and my parents for anything that ever happened. You know what I mean?
I agree. But
also, my parents grew up in the education field, and there are certain things that you don't know what you just don't even know. Like, who would have thought that if you were to go to school doing what the teachers are, the classes that you're supposed to be taking, and then you find out that it's not conducive for you to graduate. Well, you graduate, but it's not good enough for the college of your choice or whatever. Even to the point where I can understand in college, like if you were in some sort of a field and you didn't get all the qualifications to graduate in that field, it makes sense. But that's a shame. But as you said, you turn that negative into a positive.
Yeah, and I'm sure that at the time, those guidance counselors didn't know that the way we worded the 9th grade science course was not going to be acceptable through the clearinghouse. You know what I mean?
Sure, absolutely.
So,
and that clearinghouse is no joke. I just went through it with my own kids, and you're getting to the point where you're going to be seeing that with yours. Right,
and he's totally different from me. His mom does a good job with him, and I think he's like a 4'8" kid, and he takes it serious. It's totally different than I was. I just wanted to play ball, and that was it. You know what I mean? But him hearing my story 1,000 times, I'm pretty sure scares the heck out of him.
I mean? So.
if he gets an opportunity, and then he goes down the same road that I had to go down, then it's kind of like, what the heck? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So you did say you had 3 years with Lou Holtz. So any long lasting lessons that you learned from him? I've heard him so many times talk about, building up these men that he was coaching. And Paul Grassmanis, real well, he's talked about just Lou Holtz and the honor to play for him. So I'm curious what you took from him.
Okay, before I get to that, we went 1-21 my first 2 years.
Okay.
So I was 1-10 with Brad, and I was 0-11 with Lou. So I'm bringing that to your attention because Lou still had every player in the locker room believing at 0-9. Right?
Hey, listen.
The one thing I say about Coach Holtz, he was very upfront from day one. And he said, listen, man, you are here to play football. Make no mistake about it, right? I need every ounce of your dedication to be committed to be here to play football. Yeah, education is important, but at the end of the day, you are here to play football. He said, if you aspire to go back home and work where you grew up at, I would recommend that you go back to a local industry, a company, start at the bottom and work your way up, and you'll make it to the top before you spend what you're going to spend wasting time in college.
That's interesting.
If you're about it.
That is interesting, but
I think he reminds me a little bit of John Harbaugh in this aspect. He's ready for the guys to be all in. He doesn't want you to be partly in. You have to be all in. And if not, I've talked to Harbs before. He said, to his guys now, he's like, well, there's the door. If you're not all in, if you're not going to give us everything you got, as B Doc would say, then there's the door. You got to be on your way out. So I think that's good, to say, hey, if you're not going to be in with these guys that are out there right now, then you should go back home. This isn't for you. Your passion isn't to be here to get better on a daily basis. What do you think your best college experience was through those 4 years?
I would probably say that whole 0-10, 0-11. I would say that was probably one of them because, at the end of that whole run, we had 7 guys drafted out of that class, and that's never happened at the University of South Carolina. So out of 1-21, till this day, we have the most players drafted in a draft. We had 7 players drafted our senior season. Out of that class.
One other thing kind of with that. So obviously the coaches were doing a good job in developing the players. Something wasn't going on the field, but they were doing a good job of developing the players. One thing, and you realize this, Dion's realizing this, we realize this in my family, the enormous business that college sports is, first off. But these coaches, as you're saying, hey, I need you to understand this is football. And yes, education's important. And I think that's an honest assessment for some of these coaches. And I'm not trying to downgrade these coaches, but that's their jobs, right? If you don't perform well out there on the field, they lose their jobs. They ain't getting their money for their families, basically, right? So when I tell Luke is don't get it twisted. They want you to do well, but they want you to do well for them because otherwise they're getting fired, right? So ride that, understand the game, read the playbook of what's really taking place here, and then go have success with it.
So, one thing about me, we played together for a while, is I try to be 100% honest. And that's why I can't, sometimes in politics and different things, you can't say what you really want to say. You know what I mean? So just playing the game and understanding it. But education is important. When you're there as a student athlete, you are there as an athlete first. And if you don't win, those coaches' jobs are on the line. Those coaches' families are on the line. So we can sit up here and we can just say what, the media and everyone want us to say and say, how can you leave school early because you didn't graduate yet, right? But your window as an athlete is like that, and we all know that. So when all these kids decide to opt out and go, and I've been in conversation with guys that have done it in the past, and you can go back to school if you're serious about school. You can go back to school. There's nothing wrong with it, but you have to understand that window closes fast. Any entertainment industry, these young rappers out here today, there's a 15-year-old chasing a 17-year-old overseas, you know what I mean, tomorrow. So you have to take advantage of your opportunity in the entertainment industry when it's there.
1,000%. And don't get it twisted.
People out there watching, football is absolutely the entertainment industry, no different than an actor. And so with that, I've said the same thing. Oh, how they leave school early. Well, what do you mean how they leave school? If you know you're going to be a first, second round draft pick and the amount of money you're going to make in that first contract, even if you only play 2-3 years, if you're Dwayne Haskins, you're retired, you don't have to work ever again. All right, let's just be honest. That's the truth. He can go back to school and get his education. And so, again, it's one of those things of, can you stay longer, improve, get your education along the way? Absolutely. And I'm a proponent of for my own son, like, look, obviously you want to play in the league, but the reality is get that education, and if that happens as well. But there's a smaller percentage of people where they can get that opportunity and they need to go and attack it at a rate like you're saying. Leave early, get it out there, and go get that cheese. So let me ask you this, or not even, just kind of going into 2002, you were drafted in the second round. You were the 59th pick overall. I was already with the Eagles when you came in, and you were given number 39. So tell me about that number and why did it go to 24? So understand, my college number was 39. So, the only guy that I knew when I was in college that had that number was Larry Zonka, right? From the Dolphins. So people are like, oh, you got to make it a number. So what about you? Why did you not stick with 39?
So when I got to Philly, obviously they had brought in Blaine Bishop from the Titans.
Mm-hmm.
And Blaine had 24. Where there was no way, he 11, 12-year vet at that point?
Sure.
Looking at a little snotty-nosed rookie from South Carolina, even thinking about switching numbers. So I was stuck with 39. That was the number in my locker. And I said that I would do everything in my power to try to make that number look sweet. And it didn't work. It was a terrible number.
No. Hold on. So I believe we were playing Dallas. You're on the kickoff coverage team, hit one down, and you were screaming off the left side. I don't know where you were playing on that left side, but you came down. I don't even know who you hit.
Reggie Swing.
Oh, it was Reggie. Okay, dude, you knocked him in the next week. And that was probably the first time I really got to see you as a hitter. And that was the first of many highlights as far as the amount of force. And you always talked about the hips. It was always about the hips and how you would unload on these people. Where did that kind of mindset come from, do you think, for hitting?
Lou Holtz. When Lou Holtz came to South Carolina, he was so tired of like ACL tears and things of that nature. So we had to wear knee braces to every practice. Every position. We was all out there like RoboCop. The whole thing. It was the craziest thing I ever saw, man. The whole team had to wear knee braces. But we would always do hitting drills. From even like little kids learning how to tackle, where you grab ankles and you strike and you fire out. We was always just doing hitting drills and striking with force. And it just became a mindset and mentality of, my job is to separate the defender the offensive player from the ball. And then, obviously Jim Johnson was probably, God rest his soul, was probably more crazy than Lou when it came to striking a ball carrier. So
arrow through snow, right?
Yeah, he didn't help the cause when I came to Philly, but those were two great men that probably made my career really propel as a hitter.
But when you were playing with the Eagles, what was like your average weight during that time?
I probably was 195 to 202.
and would strike like no other. Still to this day, I would say there aren't many defensive backs that hit the way you did. You had a different level. I
couldn't do it today.
Why is that? Exactly. I was going to ask you the same thing. So that was one of the questions. Like in today, I mean, do you watch much of the NFL today?
I don't because of that. Because to me, the defender's health is just as much at stake as the offensive player. So anybody that ever played the game at a high level, and this is why I can't understand why some people on TV that play the game speak when a guy strikes. Every offensive player defends themselves by ducking into contact. There's no offensive player that stands upright and lets you hit them. So their first instinct when they catch the ball is to lower their head and their shoulder. Well, when they do that and I'm standing upright to tackle them, right, that force comes into my flesh. So what do I have to do? I have to duck and lower my contact to get behind my pad. So now I'm leading with my head. So it makes no sense.
Brother, one of your good friends, I'm sure, Troy Vincent, I'd love to have the two of you all discuss this.
I talked to John Ryan at the Pro Bowl when we went last year. I sat with John Ryan at the Pro Bowl for probably an hour in the lobby talking about this because he's the one issuing fines now. And he probably was the whole craziest player.
Hey, listen. You know what's funny about Runs with that? And now Runs, I will say, like, he would go to the end of the whistle being blown, right? And maybe the slight over. But that being said,
it's like getting the burglar to become the police officer, you know?
Yeah. Hey, do you remember we were in spring training and he decleated Brandon White after we intercepted the ball?
No, I don't recall that one.
We intercepted a ball and we was in Shells that day. And we were returning the interception up the numbers. And out of nowhere, John Runyon put Brandon White on his head. In Shells.
Well, I do remember. Do you remember when Runs and Trot got into it? Oh my gosh. That was early on.
One of the it might have been the year before you got there. It might have been 2001. Dude.
Because when I got there, I was in Washington, right?
That's right. And then came back.
Yeah.
So,
wow. So you're not watching. You're saying that the NFL isn't really like it should be anymore. So you have you paid any attention to how the Eagles have played this year?
People come and say, "What's wrong with your boys? What's wrong with the team?" But I just don't. Look, I thought Carson Wentz was the answer. I really did. I was a believer, right? And there's no way he could have that type of success that early on and not be a good quarterback. Now, I know he had the injuries, and that was tough to come back from. But you know how it is. The locker room, there's something in the locker room that there are key guys that's not buying in. And we don't know because we're not on a daily basis, right?
So some of the talk
from players that have left is saying that they're kind of stuck on, hey, we won it back then, and so now everything's good. And that some of that transition needs to take place. Where the mentality is like, we got to win today, and that's not happening. I will say this, during our tenure, there were a special group in that locker room. We were better than what we played in those last few games of the season, whether or not the NFC Championship games or when we got to the Super Bowl and whatnot. But there was a special kind of group in there. And one thing that I think about you, and maybe you can go into this, like back to that rookie year real quick before you switched over to 24. Who were the guys, speaking of locker room, that said, you know what, Sheldon, I want you, to kind of follow under my shadow or under my wing, and I want you to kind of watch how I do things professionally on the field and off the field. Who was that guy in that locker room for you, or that group of people?
first meeting we went to, Lito Shepherd was the first round pick. I came in, I sat on the front row. I looked like Plain Jane. Lito Shepherd came in, he sat like 2 rows behind me, and he came in iced out. Right?
Yep.
So after that meeting, I guess I made an impression on Troy Vincent. I also had a notebook and a pen. That was just, Lou Holtz and John Gudikins. That you just never went to a meeting without a notebook and a pad, the pencil. So Troy Vincent pulled me to the side and was like, "Rook, I'm gonna teach you everything. Like, you just stay with me." And so from that first meeting on, I sat beside Troy Vincent, and he probably was in year like year 9 at that point, and he was on the front row, and he always had a notepad and a pencil. So I just sat beside him every meeting.
So do you remember when Troy would go out? He would do this every year. First day of punt, he'd line up against gunners, rookie gunners, and he would lock them down and destroy them and embarrass them just to kind of prove a point like, don't come in here thinking you've got it all figured out. I'm going to show you that you need to put the time and effort in. To me, Troy's a guy I look up to as well. I would sit and talk with him about his businesses, kind of his mindset going forward. He poured into me at a very young age. I remember doing Thanksgivings and Christmases with him and B-Doc and Trot and those guys, to the point where he's like, "You don't worry, I'm going to get you to Pro Bowl. I'm going to, that is his mentality." And forever have gratitude for guys that have done it. And I believe not only in the sports world, we have to have the Troy Vincents of the world, or back in Carolina, John Casey helped me out a lot as well. You have to have those guys in business and in life. You have to be willing to give to the next generation, if you will, or the people coming up. Because I feel like in business and in life, you got the people that are stingy and are like, "Man, I don't want to give you that information." And they're saying, "Well, okay, we're not going to get any better." But Troy made you better, which made all of us better. And I'd love to hear kind of some more of like what he did with your mindset, because I didn't know that answer. I assumed it in my mind. But there were a lot of times I'd see you with your sports coat hanging in your locker. Because you either I see you out, you're going to do some sort of interview, you're going to a business meeting, you're going to a charity function, something of that nature. You were always the consummate businessman on and off the field. And I use this in my intro, and I want to share it with you. I don't know if you know where this quote comes from. "Speak softly and carry a big stick, and you will go far." That to me sums you up. And you were the guy who was kind of quiet, as you said, plain Jane. But dude, when it came to game time inside those white lines, you were headhunting and you were going to knock somebody flat. It was just the way it was, and it was exciting to watch you. And dude, probably one of the most underrated corners, in my opinion, of all time. But the people that played with you, they know who you are. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on. Because to me, you made such a profound impact on my life, because not any of the talk, obviously Lito, a great corner, you never had to talk. You did it by example. But when you did talk, and I shared this earlier as well, the team would listen, because they're like, "Wait a minute, Sheldon's saying something now. We know who he is on the field. We know who he is off the field, because he's quiet, has his coat on, has his pad of paper," because that's the way you were. And I love that you said it, but everybody else saw it. And so, Dion, as you're listening, your dad was able to make profound impacts on people's lives of being a professional, where guys could learn just by not anything he said, but how he conducted his life on a daily basis. Which leads me back to the Deion Sanders thing. As you said, you're a big fan. I was as well. And he came out today with this. He does podcasts and all this stuff, but he had this Instagram deal. And he said, the problem with today, and we can talk about Dwayne Haskins and those guys, because Booger McFarland was talking about him last night. It could be anybody. It doesn't even have to be Dwayne, but just in general, he said, the problem with today is guys don't love what they're doing. They don't have the passion to keep fighting. They like it. It's just like social media. It's about getting the likes. He said they like their Instagram. They get the likes on their Twitter, but they don't love it. You have to love it to be great at something. And so I interviewed John Dornbos last week, and John talked about something. He's like, you show up on time. You're there consistently. You may not be the best person that plays the game, but if you put those things into place on a consistent basis, you're going to be able to perform and do some great things, and people will see the contagiousness of that and be drawn. Guys like you, Troy, B-Doc, I could see the amount of time and effort you put into your craft made you all so good. I don't know if you have any, I'm kind of going on, but I'm just sharing what I see in you. I'm curious where that kind of mindset kind of developed as well. Is that the Lou Holtz, the Troys, whatever?
I think those guys, they have a lot to do with it once you get to that stage and it's an unfamiliar territory. Absolutely. The guys that you named. But I think your upbringing and, the environment that you grow up in pretty much sets the stage before you get to that point. And then they just help solidifies this is the right way to do it. Now,
so who was that for you and your family specifically?
So I grew up, my grandmother and my grandfather pretty much raised me because my mom and dad had to work 2 jobs. So I was always with grandma and grandpa running me around and basically, they don't play. And that work ethic was instilled in me through them before I got to that stage. I would like to jump back to this. You talk about the guys that I played with too. They demanded a lot. It was a star-studded group, especially in the secondary. You had Bobby Taylor there. You had Al Harris there. You had Troy Vincent. Then they drafted Lito Shepherd. And then Mike Lewis was a safety. So, I mean, it was dog eat dog. Where do you fit in? And I still think me going to that competitive environment was a lot better than me going to a sorry football team with a bunch of kids that didn't know how to lead. And I think me being in that environment with Coach Reed, what a great leader, what a great coach. So I'm sorry, we're gonna jump back a little bit. So when we was talking about people not players not buying in the locker room, right? So you tell me Andy Reid's not a good coach, or did the players stop buying in his locker room in Philly?
Oh, they had to stop buying in.
Right, it's proof in the pudding. Look what he's doing in Kansas City. So that's what I'm saying. You have these guys that's out there making excuses, right? Saying we won the Super Bowl then. But what they're really missing are the guys that what we're talking about. The Troy Vincents, the Brian Dawkins, the David Akers, the Jeremiah Trotters, the John Runyons, right? Those are the guys they're missing. Bill Belichick would not be Bill Belichick without the Teddy Bruceys taking pay cuts. Rodney Harrison taking pay cuts, stay together, right? The Tom Brady, he could have got paid a lot more money. He was doing some things to get guys financially, right? So, but the good thing about those great coaches,
even that
guys to buy in and year out, no matter what.
Let's talk about
Bill for a second, because some of those guys you're talking about, and this kind of goes back to Troy, this goes back to B-Doc, and not necessarily, this is kind of changed in today's world. But the Mike Vrabels, Brewski, Troy Browns, they were studs on the field in their primary positions. But they'd also go down on kickoff. They would also be, punt return. Like, they did whatever they needed to do to win the game. And they were kind of all in, buying into what Bill was selling. But again, that goes back to some of the character of the guys. And that was one thing that Chad Lewis always talked about. When Andy first got there, he said he wanted character guys. And so would you rather have a handful of the AA top class athletes, or can you have an A- B+ guy and be like, this guy, he puts in every day, he punches the clock, he's going to give it everything he has, and their character will take them up to that extra level. See, I feel like Andy did a really good job of bringing in incredible men, basically.
Everywhere he goes, he does. So I feel like, and I don't know where it came from, but when you start going after just an A athlete and that's all that really matters to you, then that A athlete window, I mean, it's kind of short. You know what I mean? I think the guy that's like a character guy will give you a longer duration of consistency through the course of years, longevity of years. I'm not having a headache, you know? We had a guy come to Philadelphia, remember? We don't want to call his name, but he was a heck of a football player. He didn't really buy in, right? And it was a headache. You woke up every day wondering, oh, Lord, what do we got to talk about today in the media, right? So we were not all in, right? We had a bunch of different distractions pulling on us when you're in that, when you're playing professional football, you need to be all in the moment, and all your effort needs to be, that 4 or 5 month window that you have to get it done.
One thing that I would say that, now take kickers kind of out of it, obviously, but I'm saying in general, the public, they've seen enough movies on whatever, if you want to talk the old Playmakers that ESPN did, guys were leaving halftime, going out and getting cocaine in the parking lot of stadium, just whacked out stuff. Well, that's not football. The reality of the amount of hours that are put in to film study, studying the nuances of the person you're going to be guarding, the training of your body at the facility, the maintaining of your body outside the facility, some that the training staff take care of, and then some that you find on your own, like the Kate Deckers of the world that we would get to work on us. Myself, I did a lot with Hat Rack down in Atlanta. But for me, I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions is the amount of effort and the things that my kids have missed out on, even to what I did, the training that when the lights were off and the cameras weren't on you and no one was around, that want to be better in finding the smallest little nuance that in your mind would make you be better than whoever else was trying to take your job. Were there anything in your practice, in your training that said, this is what I want to do, that I can have an edge over my opponents and anybody who's trying to take my job?
Well, obviously, I dealt with Kate, and Hat Rack did some stuff when he would come up to Philly. So those were two specialists that obviously kept me on the field. In the off season, I felt like being on the water, wakeboarding and doing that stuff, taking those crashes on the lake, were kind of footballish, rigorous activities.
So hold on. I'm a huge water skier now that I've gotten done, and that's something that I've stated this on some of my podcasts and stuff before, that like I miss the locker room. Obviously the game checks we miss, but I miss the locker room, and that ski community has been great to me. But the thing that drew me to that was the absolute total body workout you have, right? And for me to get better and skiing the course, if I have 6 buoys to try to get through and shortening the rope, I'm trying to get better on a daily, so I compete against myself. I was fascinated to hear that you were into water sports and that you said you started slalom skiing some as well, as you said, to some of the hits you're taking, to kind of, which means that things aren't going well, Sheldon, if you're taking those sorts of out the fronts, and face plants. But so go into kind of, where did that come from? How did it come up, and where did you start doing it?
Well, there's a neighbor, Rick Williams. I think he's from Seattle, Washington. He grew up skiing, and I can't remember. It was one. He got me up on 2 skis the day before I was supposed to leave to go to training camp one year. It was like the very last day. And I got up. So that next off season when I came home, we started right away. And he just started teaching me and working with me. And then we would get up every morning at like 6, go out and just ski.
Was that Lake Wiley?
Yeah, on Lake Wiley.
Did you ever try the ski course?
Yeah, it's very hard.
Oh, man. You think you'd get out and ski again today?
It wouldn't be very good. It wouldn't be very good. It's I mean, the boat, oh man, some of those crashes are bad.
So did you ski behind?
I've seen one picture before you were behind a 200, a Nautique 200.
Yeah.
So was that your boat or your friend's boat?
I know it's ours.
So you had a 200. Now you said you got into some wakeboarding. Were you wakeboarding behind a 200 or were you doing it with something else?
230, Nautique 230.
So for me and my family, we're water rats. And Dion, I saw you doing some ridiculous flips off top 2-story docks and stuff this summer. Were you doing something?
Not me.
I thought you all were out there jumping off like your mom threw something on social media.
Yeah, we were jumping. I wasn't doing a flip though.
But so you got into doing some wakeboarding. Now, like that's kind of what my family and I did. And honestly, the wakeboarding to me, I had fun doing a little bit of it, but there was something different about the slalom skiing. I just felt like it was so hard, and the amount of effort, the nuances were so different than anything that I had done athletically. But you're doing something now for fun as well as I enjoy after I get done skiing is some wake surfing. Now, did your whole family wake surf?
Yeah, everyone can do that. You don't get hurt. Crashes don't hurt.
It's like jumping off the back of a boat. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Now, do you all spend a good amount of time on the water?
We used to, but since we got real heavily involved in travel baseball, we're pretty much on the road. He's at an age now where he's always playing on the weekends. So it's kind of tough.
So you kind of segued right into that. Can you tell me about Team 24 and a little bit into Brown's Corner as well? But obviously, baseball is your back to your love. Even into the facility that you have, and I remember years ago the Eagles came down and they did something on your facility, and to me, I think it's great for what you're doing still in the community. But where did this come from? Why were you thinking about starting up this league, this travel group?
So it kind of goes back. I know you asked me where the 24 come from. I wore that was my first football number as a Tiger Mike, number 24. So when I got to South Carolina, Jim Johnson, he put this. It was a little kid with a big helmet on running around. He was showing it to the defensive backs and like, do anybody know who this snotty-nosed kid is? And it was me. Right? So the T stands for team, and the 24 obviously is a number that I think is good luck for me. So it's Team 24. That's what the T24 stands for.
Love it.
When you play with Team 24, that's what it's for. We started T24 baseball, I think 6 years ago. I think my first group, they're sophomores now. My first true group was sophomores and juniors. And I think now we started with 2 teams, and now we have 15 boy teams and 4 girls softball teams.
Oh, that's fantastic. So even this morning, I saw you posted y'all are out training at 6 a.m. What were you doing?
I was upper body day today.
So for just guys like Dion, Simone, like who's all involved with that?
So this morning it was Jen, my wife, Kay, Kay's Dion's buddy, be with him all the time. Kay's mom before she goes into work. Dion. There's a guy named Anthony Thomason. Rob Wallace played college basketball at Winthrop. He was there this morning. And we normally have Garrett Zoner there with us. He played center field at Winthrop. He's out skiing in Colorado. And then there's a guy named Trey Wilson that normally is in that early morning workout group too. We started doing that probably over a year ago. And since they're out of school right now, they jump back into sessions in the morning.
I love it. You got to put that time in. Definitely have to put that time in. So can you tell us a little bit about Brown's Corner?
Yeah, COVID really has hurt Brown's Corner because basically it was like we had a guidance counselor in the school that was overseeing approximately 30 students within the school, like really hands-on through Brown's Corner. And obviously the way virtual and kids being pulled everywhere, you don't know where they're at. And with the COVID, we hadn't really had hands-on with the kids in probably, 6-7 months, I would say. So we're kind of in limbo with Brown's Corner.
But what was the mindset behind what you wanted to actually do with Brown's Corner?
So I told you the story about the clearinghouse, and I was denied to go to school because of the 9th grade science course.
Yep.
The mindset was I didn't want another student athlete, which you couldn't just do athletes. So I didn't want another student to really fall through the cracks. So we put a guidance counselor in my high school, program director, to basically bridge the gap. And we identified some of the students that were in 8th grade that they were on that bubble. Mm-hmm. They could go either way. And they were, the principal at the middle school would kind of give us an idea of those students. And we would bring them into the Brown's Corner family. And that way we could monitor them for 4 years through high school.
That's fantastic. And even to the point you talked about even the importance of families having meals together. And as you said before in the past, like, you know, you're going one way, Jenny's going the other way. Like same thing with my family, with my wife. And we had soccer families, we had lacrosse, we had football. We were doing it all. And we're always going to different places. And it's tough, you know, to have that. But you share the importance of having family meals, and what you even try to do with Brown's Corner is actually even have some of those people come together to have discussions with the parents and have the kids being able to talk about some of their frustrations and things, and almost to almost have some peer counseling as well, it seemed like. It's good stuff. So let me go into, as we finish up here, kind of talking about Dion there, Simone, and then we had a couple of questions from some fans of yours. So right now, Dion, like you said, you're 14, and you said that to us earlier, not on camera, but you're 14. You're playing baseball. You're playing football. What's your goal, kind of going forward? How's the recruiting process begun? Because I went through that with my own son. It's completely different, Sheldon, than how you and I were getting recruited. You know, it's Twitter, you know, DMing these coaches back and forth, and trying to figure out the algorithm, how you get really seen. So if you were able to choose right now, your dad's passion, he said, was baseball, but the best way for him to move on was playing football. How about you?
As of right now, baseball would probably be my best option. Because I talk to a couple coaches a week, and I really think that would probably be my best option.
Okay, if you could choose where you'd like to go, you want to stay close to home, you want to move to, like my son, he went to the stinking West Coast, you know, so as far away as possible. But that was just the best opportunity for him to make. So anything around like where you'd want to go and how you want positioning and any of that, you know, that you want to think about?
I try to probably stay in state. I wouldn't want to be far from home, so I could come back whenever I'm free.
Follow down to the Gamecocks?
I want to.
Well, it'd be interesting to see
kind of in the next few years, kind of how that goes for you. And then your sister, I mean, she's an incredible gymnast, right? And she's been, homeschooled for several years, putting in that time in improving. And I remember we were at our buddy's bar mitzvah. You're talking about Skylar Shoulder. And so, dude, her back was so jacked. I was like, oh my gosh. So obviously, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, you know. I guess Jenny was a real athlete in the family, but your all's kids are doing amazing things.
And obviously, her goal is to go to the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
Who, Simone?
Yeah.
She just want to be a college gymnast, that's all.
She didn't want to go, that's all. But she's impressive. I've seen all kinds of videos.
Let's go to this real quick because, Sheldon, you're known for the Reggie Bush Hit. Now, I got to play with Reggie in Detroit. Great guy. But even Reggie has come out and said that was the hardest hit he ever took was that playoff game that you knocked literally the snot out of him as he was crawling afterwards. But kind of set up that play, if you will.
So we played them earlier that year, if you remember. And I think it was Scott Fajita. He was with us at linebacker. And they would kind of offset Reggie a little bit outside the tackle. And they would run a pick play with the X receiver. He would come in and kind of rub the sound backer when they noticed we were in like a cover one. And he would just run that wheel route on the linebacker. He would have that edge and run up the sideline. So Coach Johnson did a great job scheming the game plan early. We practiced it all week, where I would show press on X receiver, and right before when Drew looked away, right before he snaps the ball, I would walk off into a cover 2 shell. So his pre-snap read was me on the X receiver playing cover 1, bump and run. And when he looked left, he never really saw me walk off into the cover 2 shell. So his pre-snap read was to throw the pass to Reggie. That was his read. And Reggie would have the one-on-one option with the linebacker in the flat. But when I walked off in cover 2, it was me instead of linebacker. And the rest was pretty much history. But I may be ejected today.
Well, I was still, a lot of people say it's maybe the best legal hit of all time. He was defenseless. But
I would say he was defenseless.
I still don't think so. I mean, the way you came through with your shoulder, you didn't attack the head. But, I mean, obviously he didn't have – go ahead.
He didn't have it – like, he caught the ball, but I don't think they'll say he had a chance to make a football move.
It would be interesting. We need to get Runs on the phone and say, Runs, would you be fine in Sheldon today?
He'll say no. But back in the day, he'll be handing out the fine.
So, with that, another person had asked, between that hit and your hit on Steven Jackson, which one is your favorite?
I would say Steven Jackson. When he was like 240 and running full speed down the slot. Now he got up and that like it didn't affect him, but that was me putting a 240 man on his back pretty quick. And he's running full speed. So I like that hit a lot more than the Reggie Bush hit because Reggie really didn't see it coming. You know what I mean? He really didn't.
Yeah. Now Reggie, obviously, Reggie had a great career, and but you always hear about there's that one hit that kind of changes you as a player, and you're never quite the same. And you did that early on in his career and welcomed him to the NFL. And again, it goes back to your size. Not that you were a small guy by any stretch, but 195 pounds, you hit like a daggone linebacker, but yet had the speed and the tightness of your cover skills. Again, in my opinion, one of the most underrated all-time players in that position. We kind of had a little bit of this discussion earlier, but one of the questions was, what do you think the Eagles, you don't watch them that much, but just from what you're hearing, what do you think they would need to do with their secondary to improve? And I'll go back to this because a lot of the comments were like, can we just bring back Troy, Lito, B-Doc, and Sheldon? Can we just bring them back? Because they literally believe that was the best kind of grouping of all time in Eagles history. And look, we're talking over almost 20 years ago. And still, to this day, they're like, that's the group that we knew that we didn't ever have to worry about, back there in the secondary. Obviously, good guys. Asante's come in. You're talking about Al Harris and those guys. But that kind of group nucleus was a very tough-hitting, hard-nosed, Jim Johnson style of football. And so I was kind of curious on what you thought could improve that group.
I just wonder who, so the constant for us, I know, Doc, he was always available. You know what I mean? Those guys taped up and played through thick and thin. Troy, he would bandage and wrap up and play through thick and thin. And they taught me the same motto and mentality. I would bandage up. If I had to have surgery, I'd wait till the offseason to have the surgery. So I just don't know the mentality and the mindset of the generation as a whole, not just the Eagles secondary, but I feel like this generation of athlete will just say, forget the team. I'm just going to worry about me at the moment and what's best for me. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but like I said, I feel like when you're not having success, then everyone's not buying in the locker room.
That's an interesting point, because there's a lot of people who are like, well, the team is not going to look out for me. And I can, to a certain degree, follow what they're saying with that. But I also understand that I believe there's a way that certain teams should honor and take care of their guys. And I don't know if it ever gets to the point where they do guaranteed contracts. Obviously, they do way more guaranteed monies than when you and I played. So, and if you weren't on the field, you weren't going to get paid because you didn't make the team, in the tub, basically. So, in that kind of change of philosophy, where do you think? Do you think players will go back to the way of your mindset, or do you think going forward it's going to be a more and more me mentality, and yet will that end up helping the player in the long run, or kind of the old school thought?
So how many players do you think are not getting the same opportunity because they're not able to show their aggressiveness in like training camps, in preseason games, and in games with collisions or physicality wise, because of fines and the way the game is, right? Like you take a guy like James Harrison, right? He had been cut a few times, but he pretty much made it because he was a physical specimen. He didn't test really well, wasn't super athletic, but the way the game was played, there was a place for him. And
absolutely,
he had a career out of it. Where there are a lot of James Harrisons that are not going to get that same opportunity because the game don't allow you to play that way.
Obviously, the game has changed dramatically since we were even in it. I mean, dramatically.
Oh, 100%.
But that kind of leads to, okay, we need more of the finesse guy that can cover better, or, does that lead to a better person technique-wise that can't just, James is kind of a weird body to begin with. He was a thicker, smaller guy. He could get up underneath the tackle and get around him, And for those of you who don't know, we're talking James Harris. He was with the Steelers for many years, and actually believe he started his career in NFL Europe. Believe he was an NFL Europe guy.
The Steelers cut him like 2 seasons in a row, I think.
Yes.
And
then ended up having an incredible career, obviously. But you make a good point. But does the guy that says, you know what, I'm not feeling right, I'm not going to go out and play, does he end up prospering more than the guy that says, I'm like you, like I'm going to get a surgery in the off season and push through it?
It's just a mindset and the mentality is totally different. I don't know how it will go back because of the way the game is now. You know what I mean? It's like the decade for us was probably totally different. The Harold Carmichael of the world probably say we saw. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And now we're calling this next decade the generation of players soft, and they're gonna be calling the next. It's just a trickle down effect. But who's the Brian Dawkins of the NFL right now?
Well, B-Doc wouldn't be able to play in today's world either.
Right. Or who's Rodney Harris? He was a thumper. Who's the Blaine Bishop? He was a thumper.
Yeah, a lot of those guys. The reality
was who? Cam Chancellor?
Oh yeah, probably. I mean, he absolutely, what he was able to do in Seattle was incredible. But it's almost reversed. Like as you were saying earlier, the offense is almost the guys that are laying the majority of the aggressive hits on the guy. I mean, you watch like Derrick Henry tossing grown men the way he is right now. It is impressive.
How am I going to protect myself tackling him?
You got to cut the legs out, brother.
I got to lead. I mean, I'm a defender. How am I supposed to tackle him standing straight up without launching, leading, and running through arrow through snow?
Which leads me to a question on how are you teaching your guys to tackle? Are you doing that new style, kind of the rugby that Seattle's doing, or the old school head across the bow?
I'm always old school, head across the bow, create a fumble, face mask on ball.
Face
right?
mask.
Look, there's a risk and reward in everything, right? Okay. You're taking a risk. This is the risk you're taking playing football. You could get seriously hurt. Now, if you think the reward at the end of the day is worth your risk, then you take the risk. If you say the reward at the end of the day is not worth my risk, then don't play. Don't take the risk.
You know,
I actually love that mentality. I love everything about what kind of you represent. I, again, said this earlier. It was the lead by example. Dion, pay attention. I know this is something you hear all the time, but your dad is really an inspiring person, inspired all kinds of men at the highest of levels. And I know as a father myself to my kids, it's like, all right, it's just dad saying this and that again. But I'm telling you, he's an inspiration. I appreciate you all being on here, kicking it with Dave Akers. This is something new we've been doing as a family project. I love to see what you're all doing as a family. Sheldon, I appreciate your time. Hopefully we didn't take up too much of your day, but I love to see what you're doing, not only with the baseball, but with Brown's Corner, way you're leading your own family and in your community, brother. I really appreciate your time.
Appreciate you having us on, Dave.
Appreciate it.
Great team. Hey, not many people I do this for. You was one of the best teammates I had, though.
Appreciate you, brother. Seriously. Love you guys for everything you've done. And I, again, love seeing the family growing, man. Seeing them on social all the time is really cool. So I don't know about you, man, but I feel old these days. I feel old watching those little guys growing up, because I remember before you were even a thought, Dion. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Happy New Year.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. And listen, if you like this video, hit the like button and please subscribe.